People don't ignore you by accident. They read something in you and decide you're safe to overlook. And once that decision is made, everything changes. They look at you, then keep talking to someone else. They reply late, but answer others instantly. They don't argue with you, they just talk around you. And the worst part? You feel it, but you can't explain why. This is called social devaluation conditioning. It's not accidental. It's not personality. It's a quiet system that teaches people how much you matter without ever saying it. People don't ignore you because you're invisible. They ignore you because something about you makes them uncomfortable. And that's the part no one explains. At first, it doesn't feel like rejection. It feels subtle, almost polite. You're still invited, still present, still technically included. But when you speak, the energy drops. Replies come late. Eye contact breaks early. The conversation moves on without you. Nothing dramatic happens. No one is rude. No one confronts you, which is exactly why your brain doesn't defend itself. Instead, it starts adjusting. You tell yourself they didn't hear you. You assume bad timing. You decide it's not worth making a thing out of. That hesitation is the opening. Because ignoring someone doesn't begin with silence. It begins with uncertainty. They don't remove attention completely. That would be too obvious. They ration it. Just enough warmth to keep you engaged. Just enough distance to keep you guessing. One moment, they acknowledge you. The next, they don't. Then they do again, briefly. Your nervous system doesn't read this as disrespect. It reads it as instability. And instability triggers correction. You start replaying moments in your head. You question your tone. You reword your thoughts before speaking. Not because you're insecure, but because your brain wants social balance. Think about this. You say something meaningful. No response. Seconds later, someone else says something similar, and suddenly, everyone reacts. Laughter, agreement, engagement. You feel it instantly. That quiet drop in your chest, that heat behind your eyes, that moment where you freeze. But you don't call it out. You stay calm. You stay composed. You stay silent. And that silence teaches them something. They learn you'll absorb discomfort instead of challenging it. And once that happens, the dynamic changes. They don't need to dismiss you openly. They don't need to criticize you. You start reducing yourself automatically. You wait longer to speak. You soften your words. You shrink your presence. Not consciously, instinctively, because every ignored moment trained your nervous system. This is where most people get it wrong. They think being ignored is about confidence, or charisma, or status. It's not. It's about reaction. The moment you feel ignored and stay quiet, you signal tolerance. And tolerance rewrites social value. Your presence stops being expected. It becomes optional. Not because you lost worth, but because the environment learned it could bypass you without consequences. And here's the most unsettling part. The people doing this often look calm, neutral, reasonable, which makes you feel dramatic for even noticing. So you internalize it. You stop expecting responses. You stop asserting yourself naturally. You accept minimal acknowledgement as normal. And slowly, something dangerous happens. You don't feel angry. You don't feel rejected. You feel smaller. This is how ignoring someone becomes control, without force, without confrontation, without a single raised voice. It doesn't attack your confidence directly. It reshapes what you believe you're allowed to expect. And once your expectations drop, everything else follows. Not because you deserve less, but because your nervous system was trained to accept it. And that pattern has a name. Most people never learn it until it's already shaped their behavior. Phase 2, social downgrading. At this stage, Ignoring you is no longer accidental. It's strategic. Once they realize you won't challenge silence, won't interrupt dismissal, won't demand clarity, they move to the next phase. They stop responding to you directly and start responding around you. This is where the damage accelerates. You'll notice it first in groups. You speak, no reaction. Seconds later, someone else speaks, and the room shifts toward them. The attention flows easily, the energy lifts, and you're left standing in the same space, but outside the exchange. That contrast isn't random. It's a comparison test. They're measuring something important: how much exclusion you'll tolerate without reclaiming space. And here's the trap. You don't feel attacked. You feel overlooked. So instead of asserting yourself, you analyze yourself.
You think, maybe I didn't phrase it right. Maybe my timing was off. Maybe I'm overthinking this. That internal dialogue is the lock clicking into place. Because while you're correcting yourself, they're lowering your position. Not overtly, not aggressively. Socially, they begin acknowledging others more than you. They validate ideas that echo yours, but ignore them when they come from you. And every time that happens, your nervous system records it. You feel the shift before you understand it. You start hesitating before speaking. You wait for the right moment that never comes. You feel pressure to say something worth reacting to. Let me ask you something. Have you ever held back a thought, not because it was wrong, but because you weren't sure it would land? That's not confidence loss. That's conditioning. This phase works because it never creates a clear villain. No one is openly disrespectful. No line is crossed loudly enough to confront, which makes confrontation feel risky. If you speak up, you fear looking sensitive. If you stay quiet, you feel invisible. Either way, you lose ground, and they know it. So they repeat the pattern, respond warmly to others, remain neutral with you, occasionally acknowledge you, just enough to reset hope. That inconsistency is deliberate, because consistency creates expectations, and expectations create leverage. Soon, something subtle happens. You stop expecting attention. You lower your baseline. You begin treating minimal engagement as normal, and full engagement as a reward. This is where power quietly flips. They don't chase your approval. You start adjusting for theirs. You become easier to ignore, not because you're less valuable, but because you've shown you'll stay present without being seen. And once someone learns that, they don't need to exclude you. You exclude yourself. You speak less. You assert less. You disappear politely. That's the most dangerous form of control, because nothing looks wrong from the outside. But inside, your sense of social gravity collapses. And here's the question you need to sit with. When you're ignored, do you challenge it, or do you adapt? Because adaptation is exactly what this phase is designed to trigger. And once adaptation becomes automatic, the final phase doesn't need pressure at all. It only needs time. Phase 3, reclaiming psychological gravity. The breaking point doesn't arrive with anger. It arrives with exhaustion. Not the kind you feel in your body, the kind you feel in your awareness. One day, you notice something unsettling. You're present, but absent. You're involved, but irrelevant. You're there, but unseen. And what disturbs you most is not that they ignore you. It's that you've learned to function inside that silence. That realization is the crack, because until now, everything felt ambiguous, confusing, easy to explain away. But at this moment, clarity cuts through. You see the pattern. Not emotionally, but structurally. You were never ignored because you lacked value. You were ignored because you never withdrew value.
You stayed accessible, predictable, emotionally available without condition. That's the truth most people miss. Ignoring works only on those who remain present without being acknowledged. So the moment you stop doing that, the dynamic collapses. This phase is not about confrontation. No speeches, no explanations, no asking for respect. Those are reactions, and reactions feed the system. The shift begins internally. You stop filling the silence. You stop over-clarifying your words. You stop trying to earn engagement. And something subtle but powerful happens. The space changes. Because attention is not claimed through effort. It's claimed through containment. When you no longer chase response, your presence regains weight. At first, they won't notice. Then they will. You'll see it in small ways. They check if you're still listening. They glance when you don't respond immediately. They react when your energy no longer adjusts to theirs. Not because they suddenly respect you, but because unpredictability interrupts control. Let me ask you something important. Have you ever noticed how quickly people sense when they can no longer influence you? That's not intuition. That's loss of leverage. This phase works because it removes the reward system they were using. No extra effort, no emotional overextension, no self-editing to maintain comfort. You don't become cold. You become unavailable to conditioning. And that distinction matters, because coldness is still reactive, still emotional, still readable. But grounded silence? That's unreadable. This is where psychological gravity returns. People begin responding differently, not because you demanded it, but because your presence no longer bends. You don't speak louder, you speak less, with precision. You don't push into conversations.
You allow others to meet you where you stand. And here's the clarity payoff. Ignoring only works when someone fears absence. The moment you stop fearing absence, the tactic loses its function. That doesn't mean everyone will suddenly listen. Some won't. And that's information. Because the real win is not being heard by everyone. It's no longer shrinking for anyone. You stop interpreting silence as a verdict on your worth. You stop measuring your value through reaction. You reclaim authorship over your presence. And once that happens, something irreversible takes place. You're no longer easy to downgrade. Not because you changed your personality, but because you changed your rules. This is where the pattern ends. Not loudly, not dramatically, but permanently. And here's the part most people never hear. The moment you stop adapting to being ignored, you become impossible to ignore psychologically. If this felt uncomfortably familiar, stay here. In the next video, I'll show how people decide, often within minutes, whether you're someone they can dismiss or someone they can't. And once you see that moment, you'll never miss it again.